Alright, so we are back, and what are we drinking now, mate?
We have the 2005 raw Pu'erh Teji 2.0.
Yep.
Yes.
So this is another one. They sold this one on Black Friday, but they didn't all sell out. So this was a inclusion for the monthly tea club. So you can see here the leaves are very small.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of sort of like golden tips, golden buds.
Mm-hmm.
So we would expect that because the leaves are so small that the brewing is going to be very front heavy. It's going to brew out quicker. So we're going to get a lot of strong brews early.
Nice.
So, and here's these leaves right here.
So is this, is there a different term for this kind of a cake as opposed to those, big cakes that you get?
Like this one?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the correct term is tool, as opposed to Bing. And so that's sort of meant to look like a bird's nest.
Yeah.
So.
Looks very nice, very well packaged. Compressed together, I think.
Yep.
And it smells great, by the way. I really like the smell.
So it passes the meat smell test, the sniff test.
The sniff test.
Yeah.
God. It will be interesting to try it out, though.
We will refrain from making any online dating jokes. Not that I know what those would be. Alright, let's have a smell of this.
Okay. Awesome. Nice. Very, very consistent with the smell. I think it's maturing very well already. With the smell before the brewing, I mean.
So I sort of, in the aroma, I get a little bit of wood, a little bit of like light fruity notes, sort of like raisins almost. A little bit of smoke as well.
Yeah, I think I would say fairly similar. Good color.
Yep, so we're getting sort of like an orange. And unlike the previous tea, this tea is starting to take up more and more of the Gaiwan as we brew it.
Nice. Awesome.
And so similar, we're using almost the exact same gram usage. For this tea, we're using 5 grams. So it's sort of an interesting visual comparison as well.
And so it looks like they say it has heavy characters are the hallmarks, and it was stored in a dry environment in South China.
Yep. So South China itself tends to be much more humid than the most of the West, of course, excluding places like Florida or Hawaii, places that would be a little bit more humid. So, so it's dry, but it's in sort of a more humid environment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I see.
And so the increased humidity will make it so it ages quicker.
Okay.
And because the compression is so tight, you kind of need a little bit of humidity just to get it going, if that makes sense.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I see.
All right. Cheers, guys.
Cheers. I agree with the fruity smell and taste. I definitely feel that. Reminds me of some of the teas that we tried while we were back in Taiwan. I'm not sure. I can't remember one specifically, but.
Does it taste particularly? How is like sort of like the strength of the tea? Is it a pretty strong tea so far?
I would say yes. I think it's definitely on the stronger end of the raw pours that I've tried. And that was only the first steeping, right? After the cleaning.
And this second steeping looks even darker. So
excited to try it.
Yep.
So, let me ask you a question about how many steeps do you go on for a raw pour? I'm sure it depends tea to tea, but on an average, can you make a...
Yeah,
I guess,
like you say,
estimate?
it does depend a lot. For probably the lowest end raw pours, you're looking at like 8 or 9.
Mm-hmm.
For your average ones that I'm drinking, probably like 12 or 13. And for the really nice ones, you could get, for maybe my nicest cake, you could get like 35, 36.
Wow.
And then you could toss it in your thermos and go on for another whole thing. So
That's awesome.
So it really depends. I would say this is probably closer to average quality.
Mm-hmm.
And I would expect this to go for 12 or so, 10 to 12.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
For a tea that's aged 10 to 11 years, I really like the taste of it.
Mm-hmm.
I actually, although when we were out there and when we were trying a lot of different raw pours, I did realize that my taste gravitated more towards teas that were not much older than 15, anywhere between 10 and 15 years.
So
as opposed to
yeah.
your personal preferences kind of swayed towards something like 30-year-old teas or even older, right?
Yeah, or teas that are, I think, as far as like storage and stuff like that, like
Are stored in a more humid place?
Yeah, I'm more okay with the mustiness
Yes.
and like the dankness, so to speak. Some people describe it as sort of like basement-y or whatever. I think most people that have had humidly stored or traditionally stored Pu'erh are somewhat familiar with that. And you liked more of like the teas that had some age but were starting to show that still had a lot of those sort of like youthful characteristics as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think, and one of the things is probably that the teas that are a little bit more younger become stronger sooner in your steeping. I might be wrong, but that's how I felt. Older teas were generally probably more complex in taste, but also lighter.
Yeah.
Is that
usually? I mean, the older teas will tend to mellow out with age, sort of like spirits, like whiskey and stuff like that. They will also sort of like mellow out, and like the tannins and the aggressive parts of it will get weaker. I mean, I guess the same thing with wine, or at least my understanding of it. That's how it smells.
So the leaves have expanded
Yep.
fairly well, but they're still not taking up. They're taking up about half of the gaiwan,
Yep.
but they're kind of chopped.
Yeah. Very
And
small.
Very small. Yep.
You can see the very tips and the buds there. So, is this sort of like the Wara Pu'erh that you like to drink?
I don't drink that much raw pour, but I think I would definitely go for this.
This sort of profile.
This profile is great. How much of this tea did you get?
100. This is 100 gram too.
crate.
Yeah.
Right. And what's the? I think I'm very curious into what kind of pricing they have. If you know, I don't think they mention it here. Or is this a preview tea? And depending on how people like it.
This tea, I think, is the last ones he had available are in this box, so it's not available for sale.
Okay.
If that, yeah. So it's not one where you can go on White Tea and
get one.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh man. Okay.
Yeah.
This is definitely a good tea to try out, to get an idea of if you're somebody new for raw pour, and you haven't tried a lot of different raw pours. I think this would be a good starting point, and then making your way towards older teas, potentially, older raw pours. This does come off stronger, but I think I like that about raw pours.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say this tea for me, and especially it's emphasized since we went from this white tea to it, like, especially, I think it kind of shows, like, the difference between Pu'erh, especially raw Pu'erh and other ones, is, like, the amount of flavor that really lasts in your mouth. Like, are you still tasting the tea all over your mouth?
Yes, definitely. Yeah. Kind of in the middle and the back of my tongue and back of my jaw. Yes, definitely. That's actually, I hadn't even thought about it, but that's one of the characteristics that I like in my tea. I think the wuis and other dark oolongs tend to give that kind of a feeling, and it's very pleasant.
And it's not even necessarily really a flavor. It's just sort of how the tea sits in your mouth, the aftertaste, and I think it definitely is sort of a quality marker of a good tea. But moving from the white tea, where we maybe got a little bit of aftertaste, to this, the differences are extreme, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And I don't mean that as a knock on the white tea at all. I see it more as an acid of Pu'erh. This one I see, sort of like Meat says, it's like very much at a crossroads. It shows clear characteristics of age, but it's still a very strong tea. I would say for me, it sort of starts out with sort of like a very burst of sort of like fruit sweetness.
Yes. Yes, I agree.
And then you really taste a really strong, dense body in it. And then at the end of it, there's a little bit of roughness. That's where you taste sort of like the bitter, the tannins.
Yes. Yeah.
And so that's sort of like, for me, the progression of this tea.
Reviewing teas go, obviously you get white tea in the mix and a couple of different kinds of tea in the mix, but is raw Pu'erh more of a focus than ripe?
Yeah, and I think a lot of that has to do with just the fact that, like, raw Pu'erh tends to be the more serious one. Sort of like we talked about, like, raw Pu'erh is going to have stronger characteristics of, like, aftertaste, of, like, throatiness, another sort of marker of quality that we're not really getting in this tea, which is fine. And stuff like that. And I think raw Pu'erh, for those reasons, as well as reasons like qi, which is sort of a strange and very difficult and tricky to understand term, including for myself, it just is a tea genre with a lot of different possibilities. And I especially enjoy wui oolongs and stuff, but yeah, I've ended up kind of getting stuck on Pu'erh and raw Pu'erh for a long time now.
I agree. I mean, raw Pu'erh, I think I agree with you in that raw Pu'erh just has a wider range and brings more complexity to the options that you can get, as opposed to different types of tea that are out there. As to get a little more specific, does the kind of tea you drink end up becoming more, or fall under more of an older range than this, or newer, or the same?
I would say a similar sort of maturation level as this. I don't like the super young teas. Like, I don't like, or at least I find that the price that I need to pay for satisfying young teas is very high. So I will usually choose to buy teas that are a little bit older, usually between like 2004, 2005 to 2009 or 10.
Okay.
And that tends to be where I buy the bulk of my raw Pu'erh teas.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you have you stored some of them? Have you kept them? And like, how do you decide if you do that? How do you decide whether or not you want to hold them for certain period of time, how long you want to hold them, that kind of stuff. Do you get multiple cakes and then you try one and you decide, all right, let's hold these for a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, it's always a tricky business with raw Pu'erh because you're sort of in it for the long haul, especially if you're buying more tea than you're drinking, which I think for probably most of the people watching this that are into raw Pu'erh, that could very well include you. So I think it's definitely sort of like a tricky round going for like quantity versus quality. Usually you'll start out with a sample of something. Maybe if it's just something like that, you'll just start out with a 100-gram tool. And then you could say, hey, I think this tea is going to be really amazing in another 10 years or really another 20 years, and then you buy 50 of them. Or however many. I mean, this tea is not available. So it's like sort of like deciding what is the right amount for you to buy. And like obviously if you're buying in that quantity, then you're not buying that and expecting to drink it up in like the next 2 months. You're planning on aging it and stuff like that. So you have to select for sort of like qualities that you think are going to endure for a long time.
That's great. That's awesome. I think that kind of gives you an idea of like thinking in long term, in the future about the teas. You'll never run out of tea, or well, you'll be set for a long time.
I will be set for a while.
If we have a apocalypse or a Walking Dead type scenario,
then I will be carrying around that fridge. Yeah, that fridge will be on my back, and we will be walking around. And
you might not have clean water, but you'll have tea.
Yeah, this is true. Anyways, so.
Great. So I want to. Last thing to add is it progressively got more and more bitter, and the fruitiness kind of diminished gradually.
I would agree. Do you think that's good, or is that something you like or dislike about it?
I think at this point it's kind of gotten to a level of bitterness that's kind of out of my comfort zone a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But I still like the tea.
Mm-hmm.
First few steepings were great. I would want to try it more often. See if my tolerance for the bitterness grows,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and as Meat says, you would expect that the bitterness might stay there for a bit and hopefully die down to a more manageable level. And I would also agree and echo what Meat said. I agree with his notes there. I think the bitterness is a bit strong right now in the tea. I mean, you could say maybe I should have dialed back the leaf-to-water ratio or whatever. But these are the normal parameters that I use, so it's sort of like the parameters that I like to use when I'm testing teas. So another episode with this monthly tea club. So if you're interested in it, check it out, white2tea.com. You basically spend $30 a month and you end up with a couple different teas. Sometimes it's 1, sometimes it's 3, sometimes it's 4, at times it's 2.
Mm-hmm.
It really depends on the month. And it's a good way to get sort of like a diversity of teas in there.
I agree. It's been... I'm seriously considering it at this point. As I said, I don't tend to try out a lot of different teas. My experience so far has been that it has been the options we've gotten, the things we've tried have been well worth the money.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's been a good experience.
Cool. And thank you, Meat, for appearing once more on InBetweenIsode. And we will probably bring Meat back unless you guys don't want him back. In that case,
no.
Stabbing motion. Yeah.
Thanks.
You guys can visit him in the graveyard of TeaDB.
I'll be filming there.
That's true. The Halloween edition of TeaDB. All right. Thank you guys for tuning in.
Thanks.
Cheers.
Cheers.